My boss promoted less qualified man. EEOC investigation got me promotion plus back pay plus his demotion. The clapping is still happening when I realize Craig isn't going to say my name. His hands are moving in that slow, managerial applause, smile pasted on, eyes sliding over the room like he's scanning for who's watching. And a new org chart is up on the screen behind him, bright boxes and tidy arrows. I'm standing near the back of the conference room with a paper cup of burnt coffee going cold in my grip, and my stomach drops so fast it feels like my knees might unlock. Craig clears his throat like he's about to deliver a punchline, looks straight at Ethan, and says, "Congratulations, senior analyst, effective immediately." I hear a couple people whoop like they're a birthday party. Someone nudges Ethan in the ribs. Ethan does that awkward modest grin, shaking his head like, "Aw shucks," and he glances past Craig to me for half a second, just long enough for me to catch it. Not guilt, not surprise, just this quick little flicker that says he knew. He knew before we walked into this room. Craig keeps talking, voice smooth, saying words like leadership potential and fresh perspective, and I can feel my face going hot, like my skin is trying to warn me I'm about to cry in public. My tongue tastes like metal. My palms are damp around the coffee cup. I don't even remember choosing to move, but suddenly I'm stepping out of the room. The carpet in the hallway muffles everything, but I can still hear the claps behind the closed door like a heartbeat I can't escape. My badge taps against my lanyard with each step. I walk fast, too fast, like if I get to the bathroom in time, I can keep whatever is happening inside me from spilling out. I push into the women's restroom and lock myself in the first stall, pressing my forehead against the cool metal divider. I can hear my own breathing loud in a small space. My hands are shaking so hard I slosh coffee onto my fingers. I pinch the bridge of my nose and whisper, "No," like it's a prayer, like the word might rewind the last 30 seconds. Then my phone buzzes in my pocket. Slack message. Probably someone saying congrats to Ethan. And I don't check it because if I see one more cheerful exclamation point, I might lose my mind. It was a Tuesday night 3 months ago when Craig first said the words that convinced me I had a shot. We were still in the office late, the kind of late where the fluorescent lights feel harsher and your eyes burn from staring at spreadsheets. I just finished cleaning up a mess in our quarterly report. Numbers that were wrong, sources that didn't match, a formula someone had broken and then ignored until it became an urgent issue. Craig wandered past my desk with his laptop tucked under his arm and said, "You know, you're basically doing the senior work already." I laughed, tired, and said, "Then I should probably be senior." He stopped, leaned on the corner of my desk like we were in a movie about mentors, and said, "Keep doing what you're doing. Promotions are coming. I'm watching." I believed him. That's the embarrassing part. I didn't believe him like a naive kid believes in Santa. I believe him like a grown woman who has spent 8 years being the reliable one and finally wants that reliability to translate into something tangible. Title, salary, authority, not just thank you, and more work. I've been at the company long enough to know how the unofficial rules work. I knew the ladder: analyst, senior analyst, lead, manager. I knew the pay bands. I knew which people got visibility and which people got buried in the operational trenches. I also knew, because I lived it, that the trenches are where the actual work happens. You don't get noticed for building something stable. You get noticed for presenting it like you invented stability. When Ethan joined our team a year ago, I was the one assigned to onboard him. "You're good with people," Craig said, which always meant you'll do the emotional labor. I walked Ethan through our dashboards, explained our quirks, gave him my cheat sheets, and even warned him about Craig's habits. How he likes to ask questions mid-presentation just to feel in control. How he hates being corrected in front of others. How he'll say, "I'll circle back," and then forget unless you nudge him twice. Ethan was friendly enough. He asked questions, took notes, and thanked me in that easy way men often do, like gratitude is a small thing they can toss out without costing them anything. The first time I noticed the imbalance was in a meeting with leadership. I was presenting our monthly performance analysis, and I'd built the entire deck, data, narrative, recommendations, all of it, over the weekend because Craig had forgotten to tell me the deadline moved up. Halfway through, The VP asked a question about one of the metrics, and before I could answer, Ethan jumped in. He didn't answer it correctly. Not wrong enough to be obviously wrong, but wrong enough to be misleading. I corrected him gently. Actually, it's the rolling average, not the raw weekly. And Craig's eyes flicked to me like I committed a social crime. After the meeting, Craig pulled me aside and said, "You don't need to undermine your teammates." Undermine. I had corrected a number. A number. The thing we're paid to be accurate about. I started noticing the pattern after that. Ethan would speak first in meetings, even when he didn't have the details. Craig would nod, pleased. If I spoke, Craig would either interrupt or translate what I said into simpler words and repeat it like it was new. When I got praised by another department, Craig would forward the email with a one-line "nice" and then assign me 2 more tasks. When Ethan did something average, Craig would mention it in the team chat. Great initiative. Love the ownership here. Ethan started getting invited to meetings I wasn't, especially the ones with leadership, visibility meetings, the kind where promotions are born. Still, I kept my head down and did the work. Because that's what I was taught. Be undeniable. Make it so they can't ignore you. I built the new reporting pipeline. I improved our error rate. I trained new hires. I took on a cross-functional project that was technically optional, but mysteriously became mandatory once I said yes. I worked late. I answered emails on weekends. I did the thing women do when we sense the bar is moving. We sprint after it. Then Craig said promotions were coming. So when he announced Ethan's promotion in that conference room and never even glanced at me, it wasn't just disappointment. It felt like my reality being rewritten in front of an audience. I stayed in the bathroom stall until my breathing slowed and my eyes stopped stinging. I splashed water on my face, patted it dry with rough paper towels, and stared at myself in the mirror like I was checking if my expression matched what I needed to survive the rest of the day. My cheeks were flushed. My eyes were bright with contained anger. I practiced a neutral face. I told myself, don't cry at your desk. Don't give Craig that story to tell later about how you're emotional. When I walked back to my desk, Ethan was there, standing with his hands in his pockets like he was waiting for a photo op. "Hey," he said, smiling. "Crazy, right?" I set my bag down slowly. "Did you know?" I asked. He hesitated just long enough. Craig hinted he admitted, but I didn't think it was like official. I stared at him. "Congratulations," I said, because my mouth knew the polite script even while my stomach churned. He nodded, then leaned closer, lowering his voice like he was sharing a secret. "Look," he said, "I'm sure you're next. Craig said you're great. He said you just don't always put yourself out there. Put yourself out there." I almost laughed. I had been out there like a flag in a storm for years. "Thanks," I said, but my voice sounded distant even to me. Ethan patted the edge of my desk in this weird, patronizing way and walked off. 10 minutes later, Craig appeared at my cubicle with that satisfied, handled expression. "You okay?" he asked, tone too casual. I turned my chair slightly to face him. "I wasn't considered," I said. "Not a question. A statement." Craig sighed like I'd asked him to do math. "It wasn't about your performance," he said immediately, which is always the first lie. "It's about leadership style, visibility. Ethan's got a certain presence." "Presence," I repeated. Craig nodded, as if this made perfect sense. "You're a rock," he said. "You're reliable, but you're not assertive in the same way. Leadership is perception." I felt something in my chest tighten. "You told me I was doing senior work," I said. Craig smiled thinly. "And you are. That's why we need you where you are." Then he added, almost as an afterthought, "Plus, Ethan's got a family now. He needs the bump." The words landed like a slap. Family now. Bump. Like my rent didn't exist, like my student loans didn't exist, like my life was a hobby. "So, because he has a wife, he gets promoted?" I asked, voice low. Craig's eyes narrowed. "Don't twist it," he said. "I'm just saying it makes sense for him right now." That's when my anger stopped being a feeling and became a plan. Not a revenge fantasy plan. A practical plan. A documentation plan. Because I'd heard enough women talk about this exact thing to know how it goes if you don't. You complain, they call you bitter. You ask for a reason, they give you vibes. You push, they say you're not a culture fit. And then you either quit quietly or stay and rot. So I took a deep breath and said, I want the criteria in writing. Craig's face flickered with irritation. Why, he asked. Because I'm being told I'm doing the work, but I'm not being rewarded, I said. And I want to understand what I'm missing. Craig stared at me like I'd spoken a different language. We can talk, he said, and his tone shifted into warning. But don't make this into something it's not. I nodded. Sure, I said, already knowing I was going to make it exactly what it was. That night, I went home and opened my laptop. Not my work laptop, my personal one. I started pulling up every performance review, every email praising my work, every project timeline with my name on it, every instance where Craig explicitly acknowledged I was doing senior-level responsibilities. I made a folder. I took screenshots. I wrote dates. I didn't know yet what I would do with it. I just knew I needed it. Over the next week, I did what people always tell you to do first. I went to HR. I booked a meeting with a representative named Linda, who had a calm voice and eyes that didn't quite meet mine. I explained what happened. I asked about the promotion process. I mentioned Craig's presence comment. I mentioned the family now comment. I mentioned that Ethan had less experience and fewer deliverables. Linda nodded like she'd heard all of this before, which made my stomach sink. What outcome are you hoping for? She asked. Equal consideration, I said, and to understand why my work doesn't matter. Linda gave a small, sympathetic smile. Promotion decisions can be subjective, she said. Sometimes it's about fit. Fit, another vibe word. I'd like a formal review, I said. And I want my pay assessed against the role I've been performing. Linda's smile tightened. We can open a case, she said, but I want to set expectations. These situations can be complex. Complex meant slow. Complex meant they'd rather I drop it. Then Craig started retaliating in tiny ways that were just deniable enough to make you feel crazy. Meetings I used to be invited to suddenly weren't on my calendar. He reassigned one of my projects to Ethan to give him growth. He started CCing Ethan on emails that used to come to me, and Ethan would respond with a summary of my work like he'd produced it. Craig began critiquing my tone in emails, try to be friendlier, while praising Ethan for being direct. The workload didn't decrease. It just became invisible and uncredited. The most infuriating part was how Craig spoke to me after I went to HR. He became falsely kind, like he was performing professionalism. I hear you're feeling overlooked, he said one morning, leaning on my desk again like he owned the space. I want to help, but you have to understand, going to HR makes you look difficult. I looked up at him. I'm difficult because I asked for fairness? I said. Craig's lips pressed together. I'm just telling you how it's perceived, he said, again with the perception language. Perception matters. It hit me then that Craig was going to keep using perception as a weapon, because it let him control the narrative without ever engaging facts. If he could frame me as difficult, he could justify anything. That week, a coworker named Tanya, one of the few women in our department who had been there longer than me, stopped by my desk when Craig wasn't around. I heard about Ethan, she said quietly. I didn't answer. My face was too tired for pretending. Tanya sighed. You're not the first, she said. Craig likes promoting guys he can take credit for. I looked at her. So what did you do? I asked. Tanya's eyes flicked around, then back to me. I left, she said. I wish I'd fought harder, but I didn't have the energy. She hesitated. If you're going to fight, document everything. Everything. And don't let them isolate you. That night, I did something I never thought I'd do. I looked up the EEOC. I'm not going to pretend I went in with some dramatic, I'm going to take them down mindset. I went in with dread. The EEOC felt like a huge step, like crossing a line you can't uncross. Part of me still wanted to believe there was a misunderstanding, that HR would fix it, that Craig would suddenly see reason. But then I replayed his words, family now, presence, difficult, and I thought about the way my work had been quietly mined for years. I filled out the intake questionnaire. I listed my role, my tenure, Ethan's role, the promotion date. I described the comments. I described the pattern. I attached documents. When they offered me an interview slot, my hands shook as I clicked confirm. The EOC interview was strangely anticlimactic. A woman on a video call asked me questions in a steady voice. She didn't react dramatically. She didn't treat me like I was overreacting. She just asked for facts, timelines, comparators, documentation. When I mentioned Craig's Family Now comment, she paused and said, "That's important." When I described the shift in my workload after HR, she said, "Retaliation is also covered." She explained what could happen next: mediation, investigation, requests for information. She also told me something that made my chest loosen. I wasn't crazy for thinking it mattered. When the company got the notice, Craig's behavior changed overnight. He didn't rage. He got colder. He stopped chatting. He started speaking to me only via email, like he'd been advised. He pulled Ethan into more meetings, like he was trying to cement the narrative before anyone could examine it. HR became suddenly available and concerned. Linda emailed me asking if I'd be open to informal resolution. The whole system that had been slow to hear me became fast when a federal agency was involved. Mediation happened first. We sat in separate virtual rooms. There was a mediator who spoke in the tone of someone trying to keep a lid on boiling water. The company's representative said things like, "We value diversity, and we take concerns seriously, and we believe this was a misunderstanding." My mouth went dry listening to them frame years of bias as a misunderstanding. They offered me a small payout to drop it. No promotion, no change, just money and a silence agreement. I said no, not because I wanted revenge, because the money was an admission without correction, because I didn't want to walk away with a check and leave the next woman to get steamrolled the same way, because Craig would learn he could buy off accountability. So the mediation ended without a settlement, and the investigation began. This is the part people don't see when they imagine reporting. It's not dramatic. It's long. It's document requests. It's statements. It's reliving conversations you'd rather forget. The EEOC asked for performance records, promotion criteria, emails, meeting notes, and my company had to produce them. They interviewed co-workers. They asked Craig to justify the decision. They asked why my responsibilities matched the promoted role without the title or pay. I didn't know what Craig said in his interviews, but I saw the effects. He started avoiding me in the hallway like I was contagious. He began acting overly polite in group meetings, like he was trying to erase his own history. Ethan looked increasingly uncomfortable, like he'd realized his promotion was being examined under a bright light, and it didn't look as clean as he'd hoped. One afternoon, Tanya messaged me. They interviewed me. I told them the truth. My throat tightened reading that. The truth felt like a rare currency in that building. Then the company made a mistake. One that, in hindsight, probably helped me more than anything. Craig sent an email to HR about me and accidentally CC'd me on it. It was short, and it made my stomach drop. "We need to manage her expectations. She's not leadership material. She gets emotional and holds grudges. I'm concerned she'll poison the team." That was it. No mention of my work. No mention of deliverables. Just character assassination, neatly typed. I stared at the email until my vision blurred. Then I forwarded it to the EEOC investigator in my own folder, hand steady, because at that point, the fear had burned out and left something harder behind: certainty. The next month was quiet in the way quiet becomes before storm. HR stopped messaging me. Craig stopped trying to coach me. Ethan stopped looking me in the eye. I kept doing my job because rent doesn't pause for justice. Then, on a Thursday afternoon, I got a calendar invite from HR. Meeting, business update. No agenda. Just Linda, someone from legal, and a VP I'd only spoken to twice. My stomach twisted so hard I almost canceled, but I forced myself to log on. The VP didn't waste time. "We've completed an internal review alongside the ongoing process," he said, voice stiff. "We want to resolve this." Linda's face looked carefully neutral. The legal person didn't smile. "We're offering you the senior analyst position effective immediately," the VP said, "with back pay to the date the promotion decision took effect." He paused, then added, "plus an adjustment to your base salary consistent with the band." For a second, I couldn't speak. My throat felt like it closed. And, he continued, "the reporting line will change. You will no longer report to Craig." My heart pounded. Okay, I managed. The VP inhaled like he was pushing through something uncomfortable. Craig is being reassigned, he said, which was corporate code. He will no longer oversee this function. I didn't ask if that meant demotion. I could hear it in the tightness of the words. I could also hear something else, fear. Not fear of me, fear of consequences, fear of the paper trail. Linda spoke next, sliding into that smoother HR voice. We'd also like to confirm that Ethan will return to analyst while we restructure the role, she said, eyes still not meeting mine. This is not a reflection on his performance. I almost laughed, but it came out as a breath. Not a reflection on his performance. It was absolutely a reflection on his performance and on the way he got there. They presented the settlement terms. It wasn't just money. It was title. It was back pay. It was a change in reporting. It was corrective action. I asked one question because I learned to ask. Is this in writing? I said, yes. Linda said quickly. We'll document everything. Then I wanted to include a non-retaliation clause. I said, voice steady. The legal person nodded like they expected that. Of course. When the meeting ended, I sat at my desk staring at the wall, hands trembling, not from fear this time, but from adrenaline. It felt surreal, like someone had handed me my own life back after I'd been living in a version where my work didn't count. Later that day, Craig walked past my desk. He didn't stop. He didn't look at me. His jaw was tight, his eyes fixed straight ahead like if he didn't acknowledge me. He could pretend I didn't exist. He looked smaller than he used to, not physically, but in presence. Real presence, not Craig's buzzword. The kind that comes from power and the kind that shrinks when power is taken away. Ethan approached me the next morning, hovering at the edge of my cubicle like he was afraid I might bite. Hey, he said, voice low. Can we talk? I looked up. Sure, I said, and my tone surprised me because it wasn't triumphant. It was tired. He swallowed. I didn't know, he said quickly. About the reasons. I mean, Craig said. Craig said a lot. I interrupted, gently but firmly. Ethan's cheeks flushed. I didn't think it would. I didn't think it was unfair. I stared at him for a long second, and in that pause, I felt everything at once. Anger at his willful blindness, exhaustion at being the one who had to fight, and this quiet, cold understanding that people believe what benefits them. You didn't want to think it was unfair, I said. He looked down. I'm sorry, he muttered. I nodded once. Okay, I said, because I didn't have the energy to turn his apology into emotional caretaking. I'm not here to punish you. I'm here to not be erased. He lingered like he wanted absolution, then walked away when he didn't get it. When the promotion became public, the department reacted like departments do. Half congratulations, half whispers. Some people messaged me privately. So happy for you. You deserve this. I was wondering when they'd fix that. Others avoided eye contact like my win was contagious. A couple men joked, guess I should file a complaint too, like it was a hack, not months of stress and documentation and risking my career. I smiled politely and let it slide because I didn't want to become the office lesson. But in private, in the quiet moments, I felt the weight of it. The back pay hit my account in a single lump sum, and I stared at the number like it was proof I wasn't imagining things. I paid off a chunk of debt. I put some aside. I bought myself one ridiculous fancy dinner and ate it slowly, not as a celebration of winning, but as a small act of care for the part of me that had been running on fumes. The strangest part was how my body kept reacting like I was still in danger even after it was resolved. For weeks, every email notification made my stomach clench. Every calendar invite from HR made my hands sweat. I catch myself rehearsing explanations in my head before meetings, like I still had to justify my existence. I also kept thinking about the conference room clapping, about how normal everyone looked while my insides fractured, about how Craig had expected that moment to be the end of the story, the moment I swallowed it and went back to being the rock. He promoted Ethan because Ethan was easier to praise, easier to mold, easier to put on a slide as leadership. Craig didn't want a woman with receipts. He didn't want someone who would say, calmly, put it in writing. And he definitely didn't expect me to escalate past the internal maze designed to exhaust you. I'm not telling this story because I think the system is perfect. It's not. It's slow. It's stressful. It asks the harmed person to do most of the labor. But I'm telling it because for the first time in my career, I watched a company be forced to attach consequences to behavior instead of smoothing it over with fit and presence. Craig's reassignment became a demotion within a month, though nobody called it that out loud. He was moved to a role with no direct reports, no hiring influence, no promotion input. People stopped laughing at his jokes. Leadership stopped looping him into meetings. He became irrelevant. Watching that happen wasn't satisfying in a movie way. It was sobering, because it confirmed something I'd always suspected. It had never been about his talent. It had been about unchecked power and people's willingness to let him keep it. Ethan stayed, downgraded, quieter. He stopped jumping in so fast in meetings. Sometimes when I spoke, he actually listened. I didn't become his mentor again. I didn't owe him that. But I did watch him learn a little what it feels like when the spotlight isn't automatically yours. And me? I took the promotion and the new reporting line and the back pay, and I did something I never used to do. I stopped over-explaining myself. I stopped volunteering for extra work just to prove I belonged. I started saying no without a paragraph attached. I started taking lunch away from my desk. I started treating my time like it mattered. The weird thing is, after all of this, the part that sticks with me most isn't the outcome. It's that moment in the bathroom stall, forehead against metal, whispering no, because that was the moment I realized how deep the conditioning goes. How quickly a system can make you doubt your own worth when it's wrapped in polite language and office smiles. I didn't get my promotion because I begged. I got it because I documented, I spoke up, and I refused to accept the version of reality they tried to hand me, where I was not leadership material despite doing leadership work. I got back pay because they had underpaid me for what I'd already been doing. I got his demotion because his words, typed, recorded, repeated, finally had to mean something. And the next time someone starts clapping while my name is missing from the slide, I won't need a bathroom stall to remind me. I'm not invisible. I'm just inconvenient to the people who benefit from keeping me small.